Rabbit Hole Roundup, episode 26. Have us 90s kids been ruined?
May I? Hug me, brother! Give it!
What's happening, guys? Jared Weiss back here with another video on the Jared and James channel. If you guys didn't know, that must mean you're not subscribed to the channel, so you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button, make sure to leave a like, drop a comment, let me know your thoughts on this video. Follow me on every platform. So for today's video, we're obviously going to be talking about everything that's been going on with Nickelodeon. And I have some other really great topics prepared for you guys, so you guys aren't going to want to miss this. Now, to start things off. Many of us 90s kids, I was born in 96, grew up watching some of the best shows ever made, in my humble opinion, on TV. Whether it was Drake and Josh, iCarly, Victorious, all that, Kenan and Kel. But at what expense were the actors on these shows working for us? For those of you who've watched or seen any of the clips that have been going around all over social media and on the news from the documentary Quiet on Set, there have been some really disturbing allegations that have been made against the top people at Nickelodeon, particularly Dan Schneider and Brian Peck. Now, to be clear, it's definitely very important to focus on what we know for sure. I don't want to falsely malign anyone or create any false stories based on scarce evidence, but there's a lot that we do know, and that's what I'm going to be covering in today's rabbit hole. And unfortunately, it's not a very good look right now for the people at Nickelodeon, but let's dive deeper now. So the first thing I want to get out of the way is that for any of you guys who saw some of the clips about this, Nickelodeon, if you actually break down the word Nickelodio in Latin, it actually means, if you translate it, it actually means I don't care about God, which is some scary, dark, satanic stuff going on right there. So let's just put that out there to start things off. Once again, just to reiterate, I don't want to falsely accuse anyone of something they didn't do, because in this country, you are innocent until proven guilty. So I'm going to keep the focus on what we know for sure, but of course, I'm also going to be doing a little bit of speculation based on what all these former child actors have been talking about and what many of them have been accusing these people of doing. The executives at Nickelodeon and producers. Let's just start by getting some things out of the way. We do know Dan Schneider definitely created a very toxic culture, as he even admitted to. There were ultimately 2 known pedos on set. I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to say that word, but files, whatever you guys want to call them. But one guy being Brian Peck, who actually went to jail for 16 months for molesting kids. And as Drake Bell spoke about from Drake and Josh and from all that, he was one of the victims of Brian Peck. And there's some really dark stories that came from that, as well as another guy, Jason Handy, who also committed crimes against minors, which of course were very disturbing. Now, I don't believe that Dan Schneider was ever actually accused of molesting anyone or any type of sexual assault, and according to him, he claims that there were actually plenty of adults on every set who approved of all the jokes that he wrote, but of course, some of these were still very creepy when you look back on them. Now, I have also seen some reaches, such as, Dan Schneider high-five this guy, or high-five this girl, therefore he must be a sexual predator. Now, for all the reaches, once again, there's also some very dark, disturbing allegations that were made against him. But more so I think against Brian Peck, I'm pretty sure. I'm not 100% sure on all this stuff, but I'm going to be doing my best to tell you all sides of the story. Jeanette McCurdy, also known as Sam from iCarly and also from Sam and Cat, she wrote a whole book talking about the creator, which many of us know to be Dan Schneider, making her do things against her will, such as making her drink alcohol when she didn't want to, as well as giving her unwanted massages. And once again, Brian Peck was actually a sexual predator. He actually went to jail for this and should have been in jail much longer for some of the crimes that he committed. But meanwhile, Drake Bell's dad was actually accused of being homophobic when he accused Brian Peck of these crimes. And Drake at the time, being a young kid, didn't really know what was going on. He didn't know how to verbalize it all. So this was obviously a very scary situation for young kids to have to go through. And meanwhile, this guy Brian Peck, after getting out of prison for being a child predator, worked for Disney right after? That's bizarre. There definitely has to be some more investigations going on into this stuff. Now, I'm pretty sure that according to Drake, Dan Schneider actually didn't know about this stuff when it was going on, and supposedly he actually called Drake's mom to help her out with the judge. So, once again, I'm not defending Dan Schneider, I'm just presenting all the facts that we know about. And Drake did say that Dan was unaware of the abuse, so while it is important to be fair to everyone, it's also important not to excuse any potentially very harmful behavior. And I think it's also important to acknowledge some of these kids' parents must have some of a role in taking some of the blame for not actually removing their kids from these toxic environments. If many of these parents were actually on set and witnessed what was going on, of course, it was up to them not to let the fame drug get to their heads, not to let all this money go to their heads, and to actually protect their kids. Now, a few more things I want to talk about before I actually dive into some of these articles that I saw, and before getting into some more of the specifics of the allegations. A really wild conspiracy I actually saw this morning on Yahoo was talking about how SpongeBob may have actually been warning us about some of the toxic behavior that was being done by Dan Schneider and Brian Peck, because, as many of us know, there's an episode of SpongeBob where you have Dirty Dan and Pinhead. So, could that have been a reference to Dan Schneider?
Which one of you fellers is the real Dirty Dan?
I am?
So could this have been a reference to Dan Schneider, or is this just a complete coincidence? I don't know, once again, could be a reach, and once again, I don't want to falsely accuse anyone of something like they didn't actually do, but definitely some creepy stuff going on all these shows and on all these sets, as far as I could see. And also, what do many of us in the whole truth-seeking community, as truthers, what do we all know when it comes to Hollywood and when it comes to the music industry? A lot of it is very dark, satanic. A lot of these famous people do some weird things, do some weird rituals, do some gross stuff with kids, and of course, there's also a much deeper agenda to promote. A lot of these people worship Moloch and Saturn, who, if you guys want to look a little bit deeper into those gods, what do they believe in? And I'm sure many of you guys have heard of this idea of adrenochrome. Don't censor me. Don't take me down. And there's a reason why so many of these child actors end up with completely messed up lives later on. I mean, there's a reason why you have Amanda Bynes going through all these mental breakdowns. There's a reason why Drake Bell had his life ruined in a lot of ways. There's a reason why Lindsay Lohan ended up messed up for many years. Britney Spears, Jamie Lynn Spears. I could go on and on. And of course, the pressures of child fame in and of themselves can be enough to ruin people, but I believe there has to be more to it. Whether it's the parental influences, subjecting their kids to all this toxicity and to some really disturbing stuff, or whether it's the TV executives and the producers of these shows. So now that we got all that out of the way, now I'm going to get into some more specifics. This was an article I saw the other day talking about the sex jokes, massage requests, and humiliation, a timeline of Nickelodeon's dark history. I'm going to be summarizing some of this though, of course. So now, the late 90s to early 2000s. What happened between Schneider and Amanda Bynes? In Quiet on Set, former All That child actors recalled that Schneider had a personal favorite, Amanda Bynes, and although no one alleges misconduct, the two established a close relationship which included some questionable appearances, and at the same time Bynes was actually butting heads with her parents. One of the All That cast members actually said that Bynes' father was treating the young starlet like a wind-up doll and placed pressure on her professional life, so once again, the parents need to hold some blame here too. Bynes actually looked to Schneider for help after she attempted to run away from home, and tried to get emancipated from her parents. In 2002, People magazine reported that Bynes actually attempted to live with Schneider and his wife, Lisa Lillian, although Lillian has said that she never actually moved in. Next up, in 2000, former writers actually sued for gender discrimination, saying that Schneider often took jokes too far, and Schneider actually asked this one girl who was on set, Christy Stratton, to pretend to be sodomized as she presented a high school sketch idea. Bizarre. In 2003 to 2004, you have Jason Handy, who I mentioned earlier, who was actually a convicted child predator, and when law enforcement got involved, they actually found thousands of pornographic images at this guy's home. Brian Peck, as I said earlier, he was actually Drake Bell's voice coach, and Bell described feeling trapped and helpless without the ability to drive himself to and from on-set work while Peck was sexually assaulting him, as he just kept ending up at this guy's house because he had no other escape options. Peck reportedly molested the child over a 6-month period. Now, Drake Bell once again did actually say though that the only person I remember being there for me is Dan. So, once again, I'm not defending Dan Schneider in any way. I think that most likely, once again, this is just speculation based on some of the accusations I've heard, but a lot of what he did was at the very least creating a toxic work culture and at most very creepy. Then in 2022, you have Jeanette McCurdy in her memoir, I'm Glad My Mom Died, alleging the Kids Network offered her $300,000 in hush money to prevent her from publicly discussing her show experience and relationship with the man she referred to as the creator. And Jeanette said in the book, I feel like the creator has two distinct sides. One is generous and over-the-top complimentary, the other side is mean-spirited, controlling, and terrifying. And once again, as I said earlier, Dan Schneider supposedly persuaded the 18-year-old actress to drink alcohol, and later she wrote, he placed a hand on my knee, placed his coat around her, believing she was cold, and began patting and massaging her. Jeanette said, I want to say something to tell him to stop, but I'm so scared of offending him. Then in 2024, as many of us also saw, Schneider actually did an interview with Tebow from iCarly.
Do you sell smoothies?
What?
aka Boogie, I think he's known as. And in that interview, Schneider says he did not hire dialogue coach Brian Peck. Schneider also apologized for requesting massages from employees and expressed regret for participating in inappropriate jokes made in the writer's room. According to Schneider, most writers, TV writers, are aware that a lot of times there are inappropriate jokes made and inappropriate topics come up, but the fact that I participated in that, especially since I was leading the room, it embarrasses me. The next article I want to discuss, just to be fair to everyone once again, because I don't want to falsely malign anyone, is that former Nickelodeon star slammed for defending Dan Schneider amid allegations. A former Nickelodeon star, Madison Shipman, who was known for playing Kenzie Bell in the sitcom Game Shakers, has spoken out defending Schneider. She said if Dan was guilty of anything other than some anger moments, which everyone has episodes of at given times, don't you think he would have been charged by now? Keep in mind that it has been 6 years since he's worked in Children Network Television, she added towards the end of her statement. Now, once again, could she be covering for him? Possibly, but I don't know these people. I've never actually met any of these people, so I don't want to defend anyone, but I also don't want to support anyone who doesn't deserve supporting. I just want to make everything known. I want to make every part of the story known, so that this way all of us can make informed opinions and informed decisions when it comes to who we're actually supporting. The next story I want to share is that video exposes pedo culture that Dan Schneider allegedly brought to Nickelodeon. And that statement was coming from ex-user Dom Luker. The article goes on to say, Brian Peck, also known as Pickle Boy on All That, was highly involved in the sets of Nickelodeon, even interacting with the young actors and actresses. He also acted as voice coach for many, including Drake Bell. Business Insider's Kate Taylor described Peck as a cog in the Dan Schneider machine. While many thought the Pickles to be innocent, All That actress Giovanni Samuels implied otherwise, as she said in the docuseries, Pickles? Look, this is the mind of Dan Schneider, you gotta ask him. Tracy Brown, the mother of All That star Brian Herney, also spoke on the Pickles sketch, claiming the Pickles don't look like, private parts to you. This is a children's television show. Why is that in the show? All That star Kyle Sullivan went on to say in the docuseries. What is the joke here exactly? They were all able to pull a fast one and get away with it, and that was the joke. And it also goes and say that, this guy Jason Handy actually admitted to being a full-blown pedophile, or whatever I'm actually allowed to say on YouTube. So, I hope I did a thorough deep dive into presenting all the facts and all the allegations surrounding the whole Nickelodeon situation, and it's definitely not a good look for Nickelodeon, and I think soon enough they're probably going to be coming for Disney next, and I'm sure we're going to be finding out more and more in the coming weeks, but I just wanted to do a thorough job at presenting all sides, at presenting everything that's going on, and you guys can make your own decisions, but not a good look.
That's not going to be good for business. That's not going to be good for anybody.
Now, on to the next story. The next article I want to bring up is that this past week I saw an article claiming that intermittent fasting may raise your risk of cardiovascular disease. But you know what won't? I saw another article this week saying that getting a certain jibby jabber is actually going to keep you healthy from heart issues or clots. And of course I have to be careful here on YouTube. But isn't the problem for so many of us that so much of our country is actually eating too many calories? And that many people are actually eating way too often, as I believe. I believe that our ancestors weren't eating 5 times a day, weren't eating 10 times a day, weren't snacking all the time. They were actually eating high quality, nutrient-dense foods, and they were actually eating in this feast and famine fashion. Which means that our digestive systems were not meant to always be digesting food throughout the day, because if our body is only focused on digesting food all the time, it can't work on healing all other areas of the body. It can't work on healing the brain, it can't work on removing toxins as well, it can't work on cleaning out the system as well, because you're always going to be piling more and more food on it. So, as I told you guys in the past, I only eat 2 times a day currently. I feel way better when I'm taking breaks from eating. My friend RJ only eats once a day, and he feels and performs great in the gym. So, for anyone to say that, or for any studies to correlate this idea of intermittent fasting or not eating for extended periods throughout the day to be associated with heart issues, I think that's actually the total opposite. This is why I'm always saying to be skeptical of studies and to not take all studies as 100% fact, because there's obviously an agenda behind the people who are promoting the studies. Also, oftentimes they actually won't even do studies on things that are actually going to go against their agendas. You of course have big food, big agriculture, and big pharma all playing a role in this, because constant eating, having tons of calories, eating the standard American diet is of course going to keep people sicker, weaker, more dependent. on the whole pharmaceutical industry, on being perpetual consumers, on not being able to control their eating habits, and this is going to lead to worsening health overall. Now, of course, I'm not going to say that intermittent fasting is right for everyone. I'm not going to say that every person needs to fast for this many hours every day, but there have been plenty of benefits that many of us have experienced from taking breaks from eating. And also, what do many of us know when it comes to one of the main determining factors when it comes to our lifespans? Is actually being able to reduce calories, because a lot of us are eating way too many calories, but even more so the wrong calories, coming from processed foods, coming from toxically sprayed foods that people were not meant to be ingesting. But when you have studies coming from companies like Kellogg, coming from Bill Gates, that want you always eating and want you actually being funneled back towards the pharmaceutical industry, what do you think those studies are ultimately going to say? And of course, if you're someone who just dives into intermittent fasting without actually slowly, gradually working your way into it, you may have some issues. Or if you're someone who eats all this toxic garbage foods after fasting, you're going to run into issues. So of course, if you do it the wrong way, if you're not being guided, if you don't have any background knowledge when it comes to nutrition, and when it comes to listening to and understanding your own body and how your body performs best, then of course you can run into complications. But question all these studies, try things out for yourself, and see how you feel, because no studies ever studied you, or most of you at least. For them to come to a conclusion based on something that should actually be individualized and customized to each and every one of us doesn't make sense. So for them to claim that intermittent fasting is going to increase your risk of cardiovascular disease, but injecting heavy metals, formaldehyde, PEG, all these other toxic ingredients that don't belong in your body is crazy. And furthermore, I even saw another article a few days later claiming that one day of sunbathing also increases your risk of all these diseases. So you're going to tell me that science is smarter than nature, even though nature has been around way before science has? No. Nonsense. Blasphemy.
That is blasphemous!
As Stephen A. Smith says. And now, the final topic I want to address in this week's episode of the Rabbit Hole Roundup is, for any of you guys who saw, LeBron James actually recently started up a podcast with JJ Redick, and on the first episode, he emphasized how you used to sacrifice in order to be great.
You have to sacrifice loved ones. You have to sacrifice loved ones.
Now, I know that all of you anti-conspiracy people are going to say that he was just talking about sacrificing time to be great. He was just talking about how being great obviously requires tons of hard work. It obviously requires tons of effort, but he did emphasize 2 or 3 times actually how you have to sacrifice friends and family in order to be great. Now, let me just get this out of the way first. LeBron is obviously an incredible basketball player, one of, if not the best of all time. As a player, he actually is like one of my all-time favorite players to watch, but as a person, I have my doubts. So he has a boule tattoo on his chest, which is a secret society, which is associated with the Freemasons. Could he have been talking about sacrificing Kobe, maybe? This guy has been famous ever since he was like 13, 14 years old. He was cast into the limelight from a very young age. He didn't have a father figure. So is it heavily likely that one of these secret societies scooped him up and took him under their wing and promised him fame, fortune? And of course, his son even has a 999 tattooed on his neck, which upside down is 666. And LeBron, before every game, if any of you guys have ever watched his routine, before every game, or before most games I think, LeBron does his whole hand gestures, which he's doing the 666. He's basically giving a nod to Satan, giving a nod to Lucifer. So LeBron, incredible player, but we have to be skeptical of anything that this guy is saying. And also, as Larry Johnson noted, the podcast was started at the start of the spring equinox, which these guys are all about dates, they're all about numerology, they're all about gematria. Also, one final point I want to make, I'm not sure where this is going to lead, but like Shohei Ohtani also has a huge gambling scandal going on. Supposedly his interpreter actually was part of like this $4.5 million scandal where he was like betting on games, I think, but then like he recently got fired. But like, could Shohei Ohtani be part of that too? I don't know. This has been a crazy week, in my personal opinion, when it comes to like, conspiracies and stuff like that, and when it comes to a lot of information coming out. So I had a lot to digest, and I hope that you guys enjoyed all this. I hope that you guys found all this interesting. One more thing I want to talk about. Shout out to my friend Tyler Hansen, who I had on the podcast recently, for this Flat Earther, for this amazing shirt I'm wearing. For those of you guys who are just listening, it says Antarctic Ice Wall, referring to Flat Earth, because I believe that we're on a flat stationary plane. So, shameless plug for my guy Tyler Hansen. Check out his website, which I think is fittestflatearther.com or Truther Apparel. I'm not sure which one. Maybe it's Truther Apparel on fittestflatearther.com. But like, he has some awesome shirts. He didn't pay me to say this, but like, for any of my fellow truthers, Rabbit Hole Roundupers, support a really awesome guy who's putting out great content and who's doing great work for the truther world. Anyways, guys, I will catch you guys in the next episode. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, be sure to drop a like, leave a comment, let me know your thoughts on everything I spoke about in this episode. I will catch you guys next time. Peace.